right, so these are the notes for the beginning of Chapter 2, Economic Systems. If you are watching this in class, that would be because I am not there. I have a meeting, but keep in mind that I will be expecting you to be taking notes while you're watching this. This is still part of your notes. This is the beginning of Chapter 2. I will be collecting it when we have a Chapter 2 quiz. If you miss anything along the way, remember this video is also posted on Canvas, so you can also get it that way. Okay, so let us begin. So economic systems. So far you should have completed the economic systems chart comparing the traditional command and market economies. But what exactly is an economic system? Well, to start us off as notes, an economic system is an organized way of using scarce resources. In other words, it's a type of economy. So, for example, with traditional command and market economic systems, they are types of economies, and they have a specific way of organizing their resources. Command economies, for example, are all about government organization. The government organizes everything. They decide what they're going to produce, how they're going to produce it, and who they're going to make it for. Okay? So economic systems, you can just kind of think in the back of your head, it's a type of economy. Now also notice that I still kept with a theme of red, bold words are terms. So if you want to make that indication in your notes, you can also do that. We're still keeping with that theme. All right, so types of economic systems. I'm not going to spell out everything that you guys already read about, but there are a couple of things that I wanted to highlight. First of all, with a traditional traditional economies, there really isn't very many left. But why? Why do you think that is? If you think about it, traditional economies, how do they decide what is going to be produced, how it's going to be produced, and for whom it's going to be produced? They decide based off from traditions, customs, habits, what they've always done. An example of a traditional economy that I don't know why they don't put it in your book, but the Amish. Okay, the Amish do things the same way over and over again, right? They make their furniture the same way as their ancestors did. Now, why is it that there is not a whole lot of economies like that in the world? Well, simply because they adapt, they change. In order to kind of roll with the times, they got to change. And you may have noticed on your economic systems chart, there's a lot of disadvantages. They're poorer economies. They obviously don't have as many advances. They have poorer health care. They have less education, no new ideas. So there just really isn't a whole lot of traditional economies left, and specifically not whole countries. Okay, command economies, on the other hand, command economies, there have been lots of different examples throughout history. Now, command economies are also known as what we call centrally planned economies. Basically, it all boils down to the same thing. The government makes all the decisions. You want to know what we're going to make? Ask the government. How we're going to make it? Ask the government. Who gets it? Ask the government. All boils down to the government. So you can talk about a lot of different examples of this. Modern examples today may include like North Korea, Cuba, those kinds of countries. Historically, you could talk about Nazi Germany, you could talk about the Soviet Union, and then there's, countries that have varying degrees of command economies. Saudi Arabia, where there's very much government control of things, and they have some other aspects of market, but they have a lot of command aspects. Now, where the heck did this come from? Well, a guy by the name of Karl Marx, you may or may not have heard of him, believed that he had this great big theory and this idea about market economies. Market economies, everybody's in it for themselves. Okay, so the idea is that everybody is trying to produce whatever they want. Well, Karl Marx looked at market economies and the industrialized world and realized that ownership really fell within very small group of people. So what he said is that, okay, eventually the workers are going to get smart here. They're going to get tired of being pushed around and told what to do, and eventually they're going to revolt against against the few owners, because there's more workers than there are owners, and they're going to revolt. and then they're going to turn it over to the factors of production are going to be turned over to the public and be owned by the government, and it'll all be just hunky-dory, flowers and rainbows and, you know, puppies, and everything is just going to work out beautifully. Okay, so that's the idea. Okay, now oh, this is yes, a picture from the Hunger Games. Okay, and President Snow and the economy that was in the Hunger Games, that's a prime example of a command economy. President Snow controlled every little thing in that movie. In the books, in the movie, I've read both. Okay, I've seen both. But he controlled every little aspect. That's a command economy. Here's a picture of Karl Marx. Now, whether or not things actually worked out the way he wanted them to is another story. But that's what he said is that, oh yeah, you know, the people will revolt and they'll turn it over to the government, and the government will distribute things evenly so you don't have the haves and the have-nots. Now, from Karl Marx's ideas, we have two kind of philosophies that formed. First one is called socialism. So I'm sure you've heard of socialism. Socialism is the idea that the factors of production are mostly owned by the government. Not completely, but mostly owned by the government. So the point under this theory is that, again, going with Karl Marx's ideas, is that you will have the government will take the factors of production and they will distribute them evenly among the people. That's the idea. Now, does that actually work in actual practice? Not so much, because then you go into the whole idea of who's in power, who makes these decisions, and how good those decisions actually are. The other idea that came out of Karl Marx was communism, which is kind of extreme socialism. It's like socialism on steroids. In this case, you're going to have all the factors of production owned by the government, and there's no political or economic freedom. You have no choice. You do not choose anything. Okay? With socialism, there is still some choice. You still get to choose. For example, you may get to choose from a selected list of products that you could choose from. They don't own all the factors of production, so you may still be able to, for example, choose what job you want to have. Whereas communism, they will tell you what kind of job you have. So it kind of makes, they're kind of similar, and yet communism is much more extreme than socialism. All right, so this is an example of socialism that I found. This is an example of a picture of socialism. So you have the guy, there's two tables, one on top and one on the bottom. So the top is illustrating the idea that Karl Marx was talking about with market economies, is that the guy on the left on this end of the table has all this food and all this riches and all this stuff, right? And the guy on the right has nothing, very little. Okay, his pile is very small. The idea of Karl Marx is that on the bottom, the second picture is going to be what Karl Marx, in theory, believed would happen is that they each have their own equal piles, and that's what he believed should happen. And I also found this one because that was what Karl Marx, the first picture was what Karl Marx believed would happen. This is some people's opinions. Is lazy? Want all the stuff without the work? Socialism may be right for you. That was kind of the idea behind it. Some people argue that our country may be going to that extreme. I'm not saying that yes or no to that, but that's the idea of some people have of socialism. And then we have communism. I love this picture, communism. It says distribute all money among all the players. So you take all the money, and the idea is everybody gets the same amount. And again, the theory is that then you don't have all the money handy in the hands of a few individuals. Now everybody has money and everybody can share the wealth, but at the same point in time, not everybody worked very hard for it. So there's pluses and minuses. Keep this in mind. These are types of command economies. They fall within a command economy. Okay, so if that was command economies, what about market economies? I forgot to make market should be red, by the way. Red and in bold, it's a term. Market economies, according to your chart, you should have seen that market economies are based on free choice. And there's everybody just kind of in it for themselves and make their own decisions. So there are a few key features of a market economy, though. First of all is private property rights. Individuals can own businesses and resources. So under a market economy, everybody has to have the right to be able to own their own home, own their own business. You can have capital, you can invest in businesses, you can own your own land. You can pretty much decide what you want to do with your private property under a market economy. That's one of the key principles. Everybody has to own their own stuff, compared to a command economy where it was all owned by the government. Part of this is that you also have to have in a market economy is you have to have a market to actually sell your goods and services. So I define this as quote unquote where goods and services are bought and sold. And the reason I put the where in quotation marks is in today's day and age, does a market actually have to be a physical location? Well, I think you can answer that for yourselves. There are plenty of quote-unquote markets or places where you buy things that aren't actual physical locations. Prime example, Amazon. I can go on the Amazon website and I can go and buy or sell whatever I want, or eBay. I can buy and sell whatever I want on those two sites, but it's not a physical location. However, it is a market. And it is important because I can go and buy and sell my own private property. All right, another key feature of market economy is capitalism. A lot of times people talk about market economy, capitalism, free enterprise. We'll talk about free enterprise in chapter 3, but all three of them kind of mixed in with the same idea. There are slight differences. Capitalism specifically says that the factors of production are owned by the individuals. So think about it. Okay, what were the 4 factors of production from chapter 1? Think in your head. I'll give you a couple seconds.